Hello, and welcome back to the Interdrone Podcast, your 30,000 foot view of the commercial drone industry. It is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. My name is CJ Smith, joined today with Michael Peel, Chairman of Interdrone, and our special guest today, Harrison Wolf, Director of Global Aviation and Policy at Zipline. Really excited to have him on today. We're going to talk about Zipline expanding into Japan and its new partnership with Toyota. We're talking about 5 lessons from Africa on how drones could transform medical supply chains. We'll be talking about UPS, purchasing beta technologies, VTOL aircraft, and the future of drone delivery. And then we'll just get some insight from Harrison on kind of how the COVID has impacted the industry, what's top of mind for Zipline as we move further into 2021 and look ahead to 2022. So Harrison, thanks again for joining us today. Could you give maybe a brief background about yourself, talk about how you made it into the drone industry, and then a little bit about what you do today at Zipline?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Big fan of the work here, and then Interdrone in general. Been following, your talks for quite a while, and I miss going and being in Interdrone in person, and hopefully we get to do that soon enough.
Right.
So my journey is kind of unique. I've been focused in policy for a really long time. For undergrad in political science and then master's in public policy, and focused really on tech policy, so satellites, aviation. But my journey into drones was never something that I had planned. It's kind of, I think, a good story for those who are trying to look for what they're going to do next and not really having a good understanding. My dad was in space and missiles for a long time at a company called TRW. I grew up flying model aircraft, but didn't really get into it until I started working at a place called the University of Southern California's Aviation Safety and Security Program. Frankly, just doing international business contracts and being bored out of my mind and deciding I'm going to take the classes regardless as to whether I get credit or not, and just started writing papers on applying safety management theory as I was learning it from traditional aviation to drones, or to what was evolving at the time remotely piloted aircraft, and that was around 2010. And pitched the idea of starting a class on safety management systems, and luckily I had a really great mentor at USC and started teaching a course, writing papers, working with FAA and through ASTM and standards bodies, and really working to advance the industry, where I got to meet amazing people from different businesses, and then ended up leaving USC and starting a company called Wolf UAS, which was a small consulting company building out safety programs for drones, for governments and international companies, and everybody from mosquito and vector control groups to oil and gas to water and resource management and utilities. And then had the opportunity to join the World Economic Forum, which is an international organization for private-public partnership. And the goal there was to advance and accelerate drone regulation and oversight, because what we were seeing was that the speed, scale, and scope of certain technologies, of which autonomous aviation is one, is moving so quickly and has the potential to impact society in such positive ways that governments were having trouble keeping up with that advancement. And so we would work with governments and private entities, academia, civil society, to develop new types of frameworks. Our vision was a performance-based regulatory framework. We worked with the Rwandan government, and that was my first time being introduced to Zipline, which I couldn't have become more of a fanboy of, to be honest with you, following what Zipline was doing as an external partner. And over 3 years, just learning more and more, I decided I had to be a part of it in any capacity, whether that was taking out the trash and being a janitor, or being in the policy team. And so I was lucky enough and honored to join the team a few months ago and to be a part of that journey. But really, it was not design. It was sort of that idea of, continue to take one step in a direction and keep moving forward. And eventually I found sort of my niche in the drone industry.
Yeah, so cool. And I love that you found a company and you went and just found a job there, and you kind of just followed your heart there. So talk to us a little bit more about Zipline. So for anybody that's not familiar, I mean, Zipline's been making a lot of headlines in the past especially in the past year and a couple months. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the work you guys are doing in Africa, and then maybe even just a little bit like how the company was founded and grew to what it is today?
Sure. So, first of all, I'll just say that Zipline is one of the world's leading on-demand delivery services that uses drones, right? I think that we are often defined as a drone delivery company, but really what we do is act as a force multiplier for logistics and supply chain, right? Currently, it's focused in the medical supplies. I think there's a vision that it will be medical and as well as any good that's high value, low weight, right? I think that we can have a transformational impact across a variety of sectors in logistics. Already today, we've flown over 8.6 million miles. And those are commercial operations. We've had over 126,000 commercial deliveries. We've delivered over 733,000 products, and we can service up to 25 million customers. And that's just in Rwanda and Ghana. And then a few beginning operations in the United States, and with ambitions in places like Nigeria and Japan and some others. But really, I think, what we're doing is drone delivery at scale today, right? I think we often hear from industry participants who are looking to do at scale implementations, who have the ambition to service high numbers of customers. But we've been fortunate to partner with those countries like Rwanda and Ghana who see the benefit to their people in the greatest way, right? So starting in 2016, Zipline began working with the government of Rwanda in partnership with the Ministry of Health and the Rwandan Civil Aviation Authority to begin delivering medical supplies, specifically blood, in support of a mission to address postpartum hemorrhaging from women, which was a leading cause of death. Oftentimes you have stockouts of blood, you wouldn't have the right type of blood. Doctors would over-order, so you'd have shortages in various locations. But with the on-demand delivery service, you're able to order exactly what type of blood you need, when you need it. You're able to take pressure off the various cold chain infrastructure in various parts of the country. You're able to reduce the amount of time from delivery of, from hours or days down to minutes or hours, right? And so that is transformational. It saves lives. It allows the system to reduce wastage and therefore creates efficiencies system-wide that, couldn't be realized otherwise. And I think a lot of times we look at the value of what drone delivery could be and people just see, oh, it's faster. But really, speed is just one facet of this multi-dimensional impact, and something that we've now begun to experience firsthand in Rwanda and Ghana. In Ghana, we've been able to deliver 13% of all of the COVID-19 vaccines countrywide. We've been partnered with COVAX, with the COVAX campaign, which is run by the World Health Organization, to deliver the first COVID-19 vaccine deliveries in Africa and the first ones in the world delivered by drone. And that has huge impacts because, all of a sudden families don't have to travel days or hours to see if there is a vaccine available. It can be ordered on demand and to meet the number of patients that are there able to be vaccinated. So it really goes beyond speed. And the value really is in something that disrupts the entire supply chain downstream.
Right. So going beyond speed, as you're stating, is extremely important as you've laid out the entire kind of logistical efficiencies that are gained by using the drone. How much is Zipline playing a role in kind of plotting that out? How do those conversations go with maybe entrenched stakeholders who are used to doing things one way and that's the way they want to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that that's challenging, right? You have an entire supply chain that's evolved over decades, that meets the needs of local communities and is run by the community leaders, that companies who have staked their entire position on these sort of inefficiencies or these ability to get, item A to location A. And I think the most important thing for an international company to do is to listen to the needs of the local community, right? For these operations to be community led, to see if it makes sense for us to partner in a specific location, right? So one of our focuses is to be sort of obsessed with customer satisfaction or customer need. And I think as that's very much part of the Silicon Valley ethos, right? To be customer led, to be constantly getting feedback, to be constantly focused on the positive impact that we're creating. But it's more than just a tagline for us. We certainly work with, for example, the Ministry of Health, right? The operations have to be led by a need from a ministry or led by a need from a customer. Our goal is not to come in and to pitch a customer and say, look, we believe we can completely redefine your logistics system. And here's how. Let's have a conversation about the challenges that you're seeing. And let's see if we can analyze it in such a way that we can add benefit or value to what you're telling us. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think, one of the things that we're trying to do a better job of is to create meaningful analysis and to share that industry wide, to show what we've experienced in these various supply chains.
Yeah, no, I think that's so great that you guys are sharing the data, taking the analysis and proliferating it. And hopefully we'll see more and more integration of the technology across, all sorts of countries and for all sorts of use cases. So, I want to jump in.
I'm sure it only stacks on.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure it only stacks as you created these use cases, you build the statistics around success. That kind of makes it easier for future clients and states to just buy into, oh, that worked there. If we just change these few kind of fundamentals, it will work here too.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised by how many similarities there are across nations in terms of, gaps in supply chain, challenges in cold chain. One of the biggest issues around vaccines, I think we all know, is needing to keep, the payload at a certain temperature, right? Or between certain temperatures in order to keep the vaccine active or alive. And one of the biggest challenges you see across Africa is a sustainable, reliable cold chain. And so drones can play a really impactful role in just ensuring that the vaccines are held at the right temperature for the right amount of time. And so our partners, whether that's through COVAX or pharmaceutical companies, are really seeing drone delivery as a mechanism to offset investment in cold chain where it's just not possible at scale. When we talk about the needs of Africa, we see that there's a huge infrastructure gap on a yearly basis. I hate to just throw out a number because, it's very easy to be wrong in those settings. I did know the number at one time. I think it's something like $8 billion shortfall, maybe off by like a factor of 100, I'm not sure. But the point is, the infrastructure investment in Africa does not meet the need and the demand of the rise in population. And so, and road deaths are a top 3 killer in many countries in Africa. So you're both combining a need to take things off the road and as well as a need to supply goods at a wider and constantly growing area. And drones can play a really important role in that way across Africa.
Right. And I just want to remind everybody that's tuning in, we are coming to you live right now. So please drop any questions or comments in the chat, or just say hello, say where you're tuning in from, and we'll say hello back. And if you have any questions for Harrison, please drop those in.
The harder the better.
There we go. Yeah, see if we can stump him. So we talked about kind of taking the data, taking the work that you guys are doing and expanding it outside of Africa in this case. So I think this is a great segue into this first article. So Zipline expands into Japan with a partnership with Toyota. So Zipline and Toyota Tsusho, a member of the Toyota Group, have formed a partnership to use drone delivery service to enable healthcare access to communities in Japan the company's just recently announced. Previous Zipline operations in the U.S. and Africa were more powered by Zipline, where their employees staffed and operated the project. This project actually aims to provide Toyota with a manual providing umbrella training similar to an OEM or an original equipment manufacturer. So I think, first of all, just really exciting. I think we're big fans of the work you guys are doing. So it's just exciting to see you guys taking this outside of Africa and moving into Japan. I think Toyota, obviously a big company that's you guys must be excited to work with. What can you tell us a little bit about the partnership? We talked about kind of similarities or similar pain points in supply chains in different countries. What similarities are there? What is maybe different? And you can just kind of compare and contrast maybe the implementation of Zipline services in these two markets.
Sure. So that is quite a lot of questions on the topic, and I appreciate that. Let me try to address one individually a bit. So the first one is sort of just describing what that relationship looks like and how it's different, I guess, from the models that we've seen success in. So the first, I think you really described it very articulately when we say that, before Zipline did everything. Right, we are both the Boeing and the Delta, right? The manufacturer and the service provider, and that's very capital intensive. It's very human resource intensive. It requires us to both continue to learn and evolve our own system, but then also to be directly engaged with the community, to understand the needs of the community directly, to continue that interaction. And quite frankly, it's challenging to do everything all at once at the highest level possible, which is very much our goal.
Right.
So we see this partnership with Toyota as an opportunity to test the idea of engaging a trusted partner, an internationally recognized partner in safety, someone who takes operations and their reputation very seriously, who's already very closely aligned with our goals, which, Toyota's been an investor, and to use that relationship that they have with the community to make sure that we understand the needs and the ability to impact the supply chain in a very positive way with their expertise, right? I think one of the things that we learn in safety management or SMS, safety management systems, or safety theory in general is that, the idea of who knows our jurisdiction better than us, right? Like who knows your house better than you? And so we need to learn to trust our partners with this technology while also ensuring that we have ongoing training and updating and software provision to really get the best of both worlds, like our technology experience, our service experience, but applied through the lens of a local leader. And I think that that's really the key and probably the future of scale across the world, is really trusting those partners who are most trusted in their countries to do a lot of this work. Now, what was the second piece of that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think just comparing and contrasting, what it's been like in these two different markets. There's different rules and regulations, working with different with different boots on the ground in both of the countries. What's been kind of similar, what's maybe been different, and just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll say one of the biggest differences is that we just recently announced the partnership in Japan, and our work in Rwanda and Ghana have been ongoing for years, right? In some cases. So, the biggest difference is that in Rwanda we have 2 at-scale distribution centers that are flying hundreds of flights per day at some days, and in Ghana we have, I think, 4 distribution centers already, with a goal of 6, or maybe we're already up to 6. I'd have to go back and check. But, so it's ongoing operations at scale, which I don't think many companies can really say. And so in Japan, the announcement is very much forward-looking, right? So we're in the process of building out those distribution centers, building out that partnership, identifying what the differences might be. So to say that I know what the differences are today, I think would be getting a little bit ahead of myself. I will say that I think the biggest difference in the regulatory environment is one that, JCAB, or the Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau, has a very long expertise and experience with unmanned systems. The Yamaha RMAX has been used in farming for a very long time. So I think there's a lot of experience there and a lot of willingness to apply robotics in a well-developed economy that is at large scale. There's a societal pressure in a very different way to use robotics. We see an aging population in rural communities in Japan that need to be connected in order to maintain the types of services and that type of health services and logistical services that are necessary for a village or for a small city to flourish. That is just becoming more and more difficult, less and less economical. And so we believe that Zipline can serve a need there that perhaps is both medical and consumer in a way that right now we're really focused on the medical delivery. But again, that I think we're trusting our partner in Toyota to sort of analyze what the market fit might be in that jurisdiction. My specialty, I guess, it comes down to regulation, right? So I think we're really excited about working in places like Japan, the US, and Europe, because if you can unlock a very risk-based approach, work with the regulators there, then I think the opportunity to work all over the world is driven forward. I think a lot of times people look to what we've done in Rwanda and Ghana and said, oh, well, maybe that doesn't apply to my jurisdiction. We have more general aviation, or we've got a lot more complex airspace. And to them, I would say one of two things. The first is that we believe we can solve those problems or those challenges, address those complexities, no matter what airspace we're in, no matter what country we're in. Mm-hmm. And B, it really, if you feel, I think there's a moral obligation for regulators and for government to see how these technologies benefit their community. I think that we can't just look at the risk that drones bring to aviation. We have to look at this in a holistic way that says, look at the benefit. If we can save 1,000 lives in a year and you put at risk maybe one life every 10 years, to me, that balance needs to be in some way addressed and included. We need to acknowledge that risk is not just in the air, but societal benefit matters as well. And so that's like a message that we're trying to push in Rwanda. We never try to say we've saved a certain amount of lives or whatever, but we've, done emergency on-demand delivery that have directly ensured that, children have mothers. And we've never hurt a single person. As an American, I find it discouraging when I see that we can't do a similar type of thing in the U.S.
So we got some questions from the chat I just want to interrupt with. So Mark 1075, who's a regular, how portable is your system? Can it be used for disaster relief? I'm thinking earthquake or flood scenarios in South America or Asia. Would it be cost effective?
Great question. So I think the best way to answer that is to say that as the system that exists today uses a pneumatic launcher. We do it from distribution centers. We have a very high level of analysis and safety requirements that go into that. And so if a disaster were to happen in an area where within range of our distribution center, it could very much be applied within a day to relieving that scenario, getting goods to those folks. And so, what we've seen in response to COVID is that because the distribution centers were already in existence in Ghana, we could very easily switch them to addressing the COVID challenge, whether that was PPE, whether that was COVID testing, or whether that was COVID vaccines. Now, I think what the question is really asking is, could we immediately respond to a disaster that was climatological and deploy a new distribution center within days? And I don't think that's what we can do right now. We're not that we're not that portable. It does take some time to set up our distribution centers. And would it be cost effective? I mean, if you talk to governments, they would tell you that if it saves lives, then it's cost effective, right? Now, from a number crunching perspective, I think that setting up a new distribution center is probably the most capital intensive of our entire operation. So once that's in place, then it becomes cost effective very quickly because you can fly hundreds of flights a day out of that one spot.
So it's just compared to other things, a relatively small infrastructure investment, and it really is infrastructure in that sense. And you're getting all of this kind of cost benefit over time because it's sustainable, and once it's maintained, it's providing such value to whatever community it's deployed. It's just an effective resource at your hand then.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we recently worked with the World Economic Forum and Deloitte on a paper that sort of identified what the trade-offs were and the balances for making sure you derive value from a drone delivery operation. And that was one of the key findings, was that if you can create sort of a long tail value chain out of the initial investment, and you can overcome that initial capital investment, then the value that drones bring is extremely high. And if you can diversify the types of use cases that you're using the drone for, so just adding disaster relief to a region in terms of resilience, that would be something that would offset that cost even more. So I encourage countries to do the investment up front, to really invest in both the regulatory environment and the infrastructure for drones, because you never know when that will come in extremely helpful long term.
Right. So we got one more question before we move on. I think this is from Zuli Julie. What are the possibilities that drones could be hacked or stolen by third parties while they're out on delivery?
Great question. I mean, I think that So first of all, let me preface this by saying I am by no means a cybersecurity expert or an encryption expert. I do know that as a company, it's in our interest to ensure that we do not lose an aircraft, that something cannot be taken over. And so our engineers work to the highest level of encryption and closed communication that's possible. We use redundant communication links. We use we look to industry best practice standards to make sure that our cybersecurity is at the top of the industry. I think it's always a concern. Look what happened to that said, I think it's always a concern that we're constantly trying to fight against. If we apply the same idea of safety management to security, I also teach or taught in the aviation security course at USC. And one of the things we're learning is that adversaries are similar to hazards when it comes to safety, except they're actively working against you. And so in safety theory, people still have accidents in aviation, right? We still have helicopters and traditional aircraft that crash. And the reason is because they find holes in the Swiss cheese of mitigations that we're trying to defend against. And the same thing happens in security, but the adversaries are actively trying to work against you. And so it's a constant sort of cat and mouse game that you're working against. And you're getting better. Adversaries are getting better. Mm-hmm. We haven't had a cybersecurity incident, which isn't to say that we're not constantly vigilant. So, it is a concern for the industry. I think it's a concern for regulators to set the standards to a certain degree which they can feel comfortable. But I know that as a company, we take it very seriously.
All right. One more question on the Toyota partnership, and we'll move on. Why Toyota, right? So why are automobile, or at least in the States, we think about them as an automobile company. I'm sure they do a lot of things in Japan. It's such a huge organization. But why is a car company and a drone company partnering for medical deliveries?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, I think Toyota may have started as a car company. I believe Toyota was heavily involved in aircraft manufacturing as well. And you'd have to check on that. I'd have to check back on that.
That's not uncommon for Japanese companies to be involved in kind of multiple verticals.
Right. And but mostly it goes back to what I said before, which is that Toyota is an extremely trusted brand, right? And especially in Japan. And so we felt, when we look for partners internationally, we want to make sure that our partners are just as invested in maintaining their brand at a global level as we are. And so, Toyota is known for taking very seriously their brand, for caring about their community, and for understanding the logistics challenges of the Japanese countryside. And then also making sure that they have a good relationship that exists already with the regulator, because that ultimately is the partner. I always like to say we have two clients, right? We have the clients we're serving, and then we have the regulators and society more broadly. Both clients need to be served. Both customers must be kept in mind. And a partner like Toyota, in my opinion, really helps to advance, our objectives in both ways.
Right. Great. Great. We're going to move on to the second article. And just another reminder, we are coming to you live, so please keep the questions coming. We love to see the engagement from everybody. So this is actually an article from the World Economic Forum, 5 lessons from Africa on how drones could transform medical supply chains. So the pandemic has made visible to the global community many of the health inequities that have long been present. And as we move through the crisis, it's become more and more clear that the previous ways of doing things are no longer adequate. This has led to innovations such as the historic success of creating new vaccines and now the attention is turning to how we can ensure equitable access to these types of essential materials. So this article does a really good job, kind of breaks it down into 5 key components, talking about the economics, the infrastructure, sharing the data, scaling the operations, and then ultimately sharing the airspace. So Harrison, I'd love to just kind of do a quick rapid fire round